Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asato ma satkamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amrutam gamaya, aviravirmayeti, rudrayate dakshinam mukham, te namam pahi nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Today we begin the set of 6 verses, beginning with number 12, which describe that which is to be known. So we saw that this chapter begins with what it called as kshetra and kshetrajna, the field and the knower of the field. So the first part of this chapter discussed what is meant by the field, all the material world. The second section dealt with the qualities we need to cultivate in order to reach, in order to attain that goal, the knower. And these set of 6 verses which we will study today describe the nature of that supreme reality. So let's begin with verse number 12. Neyam yattat pravakshyami yajñātvāmritam anādimat param brahma na sattanna saduchyate. I shall tell you that which has to be known, knowing which one attains immortality. It is the beginningless, supreme Brahman, which is said to be neither being nor non-being. So this is how Krishna begins this section. He said, I will tell you of that, the object, that which is to be known. And what would be the result of knowing that? That knowing it, one attains immortality. Now, how would knowing something make us immortal? And of course, by this time, students of Gita would understand that knowing it we become immortal really means that it is really me, the real me. So, knowing it, knowing that supreme being means knowing my true self. And my true self is immortal. My true self is without beginning and without end. So although it might seem, because of the limitations of language, they were trying to know something, and as a result of knowing something, I'm going to be immortal. But really, that something is me. So knowing me as I truly am will reveal to me that I am immortal. Right now, we don't feel we are immortal. Right now, we feel we are mortal beings because we see ourselves as human beings, and human beings are mortal. Some of us may live to a ripe old age, still, sometime or the other, we will die. So right now, our self-identity is that we are human beings, we are mortal, we will die one day. So, attaining immortality means knowing first that I'm not a human being. I'm a divine being. And divine beings are neither born nor they die. So the one insight that came in the Gita in the 2nd chapter itself was that which is born will die. That which has had a beginning will have an end. If we see ourselves as having had a beginning then we will have an end. So if we see our birth as my beginning, then my death will be my end. But what the Gita says is, my birth was not my beginning. What I see as my birth was really the beginning of this body. But you see, interestingly, most religions believe we outlast the body. That is why, whether or not we are overtly religious, when someone, especially someone known to us, dies, we instinctively feel this person has left us and gone. Although the body of that person might still be right in front of us, and yet we feel this person has left us. So instinctively we know that we are not just the body, that we outlast the body. The body will die one day, but we will be there. And that's how the ideas about heaven or hell or afterlife come in. What is often not clear is that although we might continue to live after we die in some form, did we exist before we were born? And what the Gita says is, we have always existed. We were there before we were born. Actually, even before we were born, it's not a very correct language. We were there before this body was born. We will continue to be there after this body dies. That's the way to put it. And that's what is meant by saying we attain immortality. So really, to attain immortality, there is nothing much to be done. In fact, there is a lot to be undone. So the damage has been done. And what's the damage? That the spirit, which is how each one of us is, has forgotten that I am the spirit. So we have forgotten we are divine beings, and we have now begun to see ourselves as mortal human beings. That's the damage, that's the problem. If you want to see that as a fall from the Garden of Eden, that's what has happened. We were infinite, eternal, now we are mortal and human being. That's the problem. So nothing much is done now. The damage is done. Now what we can do is undo the damage. In other words, recognize the error, recognize the mistake. Right? No, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm not this ego. And once we undo the damage, we attain immortality. In other words, we just need to know the truth. We are right now in ignorance, and ignorance can be removed only through knowledge. So the only practice that the Gita says is remove your ignorance. And ignorance can be removed through knowledge. And everything else that we will do in life, whether it's study of texts, whether it's meditation, prayer, selfless service, anything, you are free to do what you want so long as it helps you remove that ignorance. That's the only test for the authenticity and validity of any practice. So that is what he says. I'll tell you that knowing which one attains immortality. And what is the nature of that thing? Now, one thing to be kept in mind is, although everywhere here it's been referred to as in third person singular, it is beginningless, it is supreme. Every time, everywhere it is it, just put I. Well, that's who you really are. So it is beginningless, it has no beginning, that is why it has no end. Supreme Brahman. The word Brahman in Vedanta is not the name of any person, not the name of even a state. Brahman simply means vast, infinite. That's all that it means. So right now, we don't feel infinite because our expanse is limited by the body. I feel this is who I am. Anything beyond this is not me. So this table is not me, this book is not me, but this is me. Now, being infinite means, can I cross this boundary of my body? And the only way to cross that boundary is to know that I am not limited by this body. And that's why beginningless means the body had a beginning, I did not have a beginning. Which is said, now this is a very interesting phrase, the last one, which is said to be neither being nor non-being. How do we characterize, how do we know that something exists? We know something exists only when it is an object of my knowledge. How do I know that this object exists? Well, I can see it. It's the object of my perception. So because I can see it, I can say it exists. What about things that I say they don't exist? For instance, my favorite example here is a square circle. You can ask any person in the world, have you seen a square circle? And they'll say, no, never seen a square circle. What it really meant is the idea of a square circle or the perception of the square circle has not become an object of my knowledge. So in order for us to say something exists, or in order for us to say something does not exist, it has to become an object of our knowledge. But this supreme reality is not the object of our knowledge. And because it is not the object of our knowledge, it cannot be said to be there, it cannot be said to be not there, because it is the eternal subject. In other words, it's like this. This is a very crude example, but I think you'll get an idea. Suppose if I ask myself, do my eyes exist? And honestly, none of us has seen our eyes. You may stand before a mirror, you can see a reflection, but you're just seen a reflection. You're still not seen your eyes. You're seen a reflection of what, and on the belief that, well, the mirror reflects what is in front of it. So we are not really seeing our eyes, we are seeing the reflection of our eyes. So we cannot really say the eyes are the objects of our knowledge. So, but can we say that eyes don't exist? Well, we cannot say eyes don't exist either, because if eyes didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to see anything. So this is a kind of a somewhat crude example of something which is there, but yet I cannot truly say it is an object of my knowledge, but neither can I say it is not there. Now the spirit, everything, the entire experience that we have occurs through the spirit. But the spirit is always the subject. And so we cannot get out of our own skin, so to speak. It is like the example Ramakrishna used to give is that if you go in a dark night, you go with a flashlight. Now, you can see everything, every object at which this flashlight is pointed. But you cannot see the person holding the flashlight, and you cannot see the flashlight itself. So if you have to see the person holding the flashlight, you'll have to tell him, please turn it towards yourself. But how do you see a flashlight when it's focused outside? But you cannot say that there is no flashlight, because without it you wouldn't have been able to see anything. And yet the flashlight itself is not seen. These are not really perfect examples, but you kind of get an idea of why we cannot say that the ultimate reality exists, because it is not an object of our knowledge. We cannot say it does not exist, because if it didn't exist, nothing would exist. And that is what is meant by saying it is said to be neither being nor non-being. Verse 13. Sarvatah panipadam tat sarvatokshishiro mukham sarvata shrutimalloke sarvamavritya tishtati. With hands and feet everywhere, with eyes, heads and faces everywhere, with ears everywhere, it rests, pervading everything in this world. The Upanishads say, there is a beautiful statement in the Upanishad, that tat srishtva tadeva anupravishat. Having projected this world, the Supreme Being entered into every little bit of it. Now that is the idea here. With hands and feet everywhere, with eyes and... In other words, with every entity that we perceive, Brahman, the Supreme Being, is present in everything. There are, in Indian mythology, there are some very interesting stories. So there is the story of one little boy named Prahlada, who was a great devotee of Vishnu. And his father was a very cruel, wicked person. In fact, he is pictured as almost like a demon. And the father was he was a kind of a king. He thought, well, I'm the emperor of the entire universe. I'm God. There is no other God beside me. But this little boy, his own son, was extremely devoted and always was prayerful and thinking of God. And the father was always annoyed. And he would tell his son, there is no God. I'm the God. And then this son would say, no, God is everywhere. And one day the father got so annoyed and he says, what do you mean God is everywhere? And then he points to one pillar in his palace and says, you think God is in this pillar? And then this little boy says, yes, God is in every little thing. So this father, he has this big mace, goes and strikes that pillar and says, okay, here I'm giving a walloping to your God. And then the story goes on to say, as soon as he does that, the pillar breaks open. And then this Vishnu appears in kind of a half human, half lion appearance and just takes this king and then tears him to pieces. Now, this is how mythology will describe the idea. Now, it kind of would seem like, well, this really seems like some, like a fairy tale. It's like stories for kids. What message could it have for us? Well, one message is that every little thing, not just living beings, even non-living things, even a pillar, even a wall, is filled with God's presence. Now, philosophically, what it means is this. Let's go back to that classic example. So there is this coiled rope in a semi-lit room. You enter the room because there is a little bit of light, but not enough light. You see that coiled rope, but you really see there a snake. You think it's a snake. And you shout and say, oh my God, there is a snake. And then, of course, you switch on the light, and then you know it's a rope. But now, before you switched on the light, you thought it was a snake. You didn't simply think it was a snake, you actually saw a snake there. Now, even when you saw the snake, every little bit of that snake was really nothing but the rope. You didn't know it, right? When you switched on the light, you know it was a rope. But even when you didn't know it, no matter any tiny atom or molecule of that snake you take, it was still an atom molecule of the rope. Now that is what is meant by saying that God has entered into every tiny bit of it. So this world that we see, sometimes we tend to separate out as if, oh, God is somewhere else hidden and this is the world, and we have to negate the world and then go to God. But that's not it. You can never be conscious of God and the world at the same time, which is probably a Vedantic way of interpreting when Jesus says you cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. A Vedantic way would be that you really cannot even see them two at the same time. It's like, go back to the rope and snake. You cannot see the snake and rope at the same time. As long as you're seeing the snake, you're not seeing the rope. As soon as you see the rope, you will not see the snake anymore. In the same way, as long as we are seeing the world as world, we will not be able to see God. Because just like the snake is covering the rope, the world is covering God. And here switching on the external light won't help. We have to switch on the internal light. And this light then, because the covering has occurred in the heart, not outside. The covering in the case of the rope and the snake had occurred externally. Here the covering has happened internally. So when this internal light goes off, then you will see the world as we see it will no longer be there. God will be there. And when we will see then, even when we did not perceive God, that which we saw as the world was nothing but God hidden under every tiny material particle. That's the meaning of with hands and feet everywhere, with eyes, heads. In other words, in every object, every part of the universe is the divine presence. And many mystics, cutting across religious traditions, have entered states by which they could feel that divine presence everywhere. So the more our own minds get refined, we will be able to experience that presence. That is again what is meant by when it is said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So being pure in heart really means developing that refinement, that clarity of perception by which the snake will disappear and I will see the rope. The material world will disappear and we will see the presence of God there. Verse 14. Sarvendriya guna bhasam Sarvendriya vivarjitam Asaktam sarvabhrachaiva Nirgunam gunabhoktrucha. It is manifest in the functions of the various sense organs, yet bereft of all sense organs, unattached, yet sustaining everything, without attributes, yet the protector of the qualities. It just shows the apparently contradictory nature of that highest truth. It is manifest through all of our sense organs because without the presence of God, the sense organs couldn't exist. It is like this. Just like the snake is superimposed on the rope, the material world is superimposed on the spirit. And as long as the snake is covering the rope, I don't see the rope. As long as the material universe is covering the divine reality, I don't see the divine reality. And that is why, even through the material universe, what is being manifest is really the divine reality. And we can see that even more clearly. We may not be able to see it, and that's why we see these kind of gradations. It's sometimes difficult to feel the presence of that reality in very material, well, everything is material, but those material objects which we categorize as non-living, inanimate. So like table, chair, we say, well, that's kind of dead matter, so to speak. That's how sometimes we refer to those things. As opposed to, let's say, plants, trees. Now, plants and trees are not dead matter really because they grow. They show sign of life. So we know that there is life present in plants, trees, and so on. So we see some sign of life there. Then, of course, you come to the animal kingdom. And then you see greater manifestation of life. And then, of course, you come to human beings. We see even greater manifestation of life. So as this, our scheme of evolution, the way it has been framed, we see that greater manifestation of consciousness. We don't hardly see any consciousness in these objects. Although research has been done and there have been experiments done showing how even metals react. Although that's kind of a little bit of a controversial kind of experiments, because some scientists don't believe. It's kind of think, oh no, it doesn't. But some have done these tests on metals and others and shown that they react as well. It becomes even more in plants. Now plants grow, but do plants have feelings? Again, this is a little bit of a controversial research, but there are some people who have done it. Some of you probably might be familiar. What they did was they took two pretty much identical plants, the same kind of plants of same size and grown under more or less same conditions. Then they kind of separated them a little bit and but gave them, everything else was kept same, whether it's sunlight, water, everything was kept same, except that while watering them, the person who was watering them would just look at the plant and say, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And then the other plant was given with great tenderness and great love and care. And they did find, when finally the flower sprouted, that plant which was taken care with great love tended to show much fuller, brighter flowers than the other plant. And this was not just kind of a solitary case. They did it with several, at a big sample, and apparently these are the results they found. As I said, the scientists who are working in this area have been very small, and so it hasn't received as much acceptance in greater circles. But these kind of research have been done. I think those who have kept pets of their own, you have your cats or dogs, I think such people have no doubt that animals have emotions. I think they absolutely know it for certain. But there are many other people who just believe, no, animals, in fact, there is a view, and again, this is a little bit controversial because there are a lot of feelings and emotions associated with it. But there are some people who just go by the letter of their traditions, the scriptures of their tradition, and say, well, animals don't have souls. And then there are a lot of stories about a little girl weeping and going to her pastor and saying, oh, my dog died, and won't my dog go to heaven? Won't I meet my dog when I go to heaven? Again, there is theological issues involved, but there are also issues involved with just the people's feelings. So we may not see as obvious a manifestation of emotions and feelings in plants, a little bit more certainly, absolutely, in animals. But when it comes to human beings, of course, we see that, and we like to see ourselves as conscious beings. But the question that Gita asks is, when I say I'm a conscious being, to whom does my consciousness belong? My body is conscious, my mind is conscious, but does that consciousness belong to the body, or it's only a borrowed consciousness? Or it's someone else's consciousness manifesting, or it's so powerful, it is coming through my body? It's a little bit like this. I mean, on a full moon night, with this beautiful moon, we can say moonlight. Now, sure, the light comes from the moon, but is it really moon's light? Well, today, I mean, we might have had some doubt about it a few centuries ago, but certainly the people have gone on the moon now and seen what it is. And now there is no light there. So the moonlight is not really moon's light. So similarly, the consciousness of the body is not really body's consciousness. There is this sun of consciousness within us, that is the spirit. and the body, mind are like, you could almost think they are like this planetary system. So it's this consciousness of this sun within which is being reflected through all these planets surrounding it. And you could say the body, mind, ego, all of these things are just going around it, borrowing that consciousness. Think about it this way, which is why when a person dies, the body is still there. If that consciousness belonged to the body, if it was an integral part of the body, you could never have separated it from the body. The fact that a body can lie unconscious is enough of proof that if something can be separated from something, then it never was an integral part of it. And therefore, since that consciousness belongs to the spirit, everything with hands and feet everywhere, and the manifestation of the functions of the various sense organs, all of this occurs because of it. And that is why it is said, it manifests in the function of the various sense organs, yet the spirit itself does not have any sense organs. It's just pure consciousness. Consciousness doesn't have eyes through which to see. So it is the eyes of the body through which this consciousness manifests. The eyes of the body become instruments through which the consciousness provides that power to grasp. So it's interesting. So by itself, consciousness cannot see and doesn't need to see anything. There is really nothing apart from it. Really. By themselves, the senses of the body cannot see anything either. You need both of them together in order for all experience to take place. A little bit like just the power, electric power, by itself cannot give light or heat, nothing. It cannot do anything. It's a power. Now, if you can attach it to appropriate outlets, whether it's a bulb or it's a heating system, then that power through these things can give light and heat. Otherwise, electricity is electricity. So by itself it can't do it. By itself the bulb cannot give light either. Only you need the joining of the two in order for any utilitarian value of it. So in some sense, similar thing exists. So consciousness by itself doesn't need to see, doesn't have any sense organs of its own. But all the power that the sense organs have is through consciousness. It is completely unattached. It doesn't depend on anything, and yet it sustains everything. Everything else is dependent on it. It's without attributes. Consciousness doesn't have any need of any attributes or qualities, and yet all the qualities and characteristics that we see in the world become possible because of consciousness. So in other words, consciousness itself is independent, everything else is dependent on it, and because everything else is dependent on it, it manifests through those things. Verse 15. Bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charamevacha sukshmatvat tadavidneyam durastham chantike chatat. It is without and within all beings. It is moving and unmoving, being subtle. It is incomprehensible. It is far and yet near. Again, you can see all these apparently mutually contradictory qualities can coexist because just of the nature of consciousness. It is without and within all beings. What does it really mean? It is outside and inside all beings. So when I say something is outside me or something is inside me, I need to ask myself, what are these boundaries of me? Because only if there is some kind of a boundary can I speak about inside and outside. So if I can say, like, this is inside the boundary of the table, because the table ends here. If something were here, I could not say it is on the table. So we generally tend to say, well, my heart is inside me. We normally tend to say, well, all these sense organs and everything is inside, as if this is the boundary and the world is outside me. But this inside-outside is a very arbitrary division. Because, as I said, if I know I'm the spirit, there is nothing inside me. Everything is outside me. But the spirit is both inside and outside in the sense, like a wave, say a wave in the ocean. What is a wave? A wave is simply the same water of the ocean which has taken a certain form and is moving in a certain way. That's all. So there is water inside the wave and there is water outside the wave, and it's the same water. The same way, no matter what boundary we put for this inside-outside division, the presence of God is there both inside and outside. It is moving and unmoving. Again, if we see ourselves as body and mind, there is movement. And that movement has become possible because of the spirit. But the spirit itself is unmoving. Why is the spirit unmoving? Why do you think?
I think movement presumes that it's one place and not in another place, so it moves from the one place to the other. But if it's everywhere, there's no way for it to move, so it doesn't move.
Perfect. Exactly. That's it. So that's the interesting thing is, if you are everywhere, you cannot go anywhere. Because, well, then where will you go? You're already there. And so therefore, it is moving and not moving. So if you limit it to a body and mind, it moves. If you see it as it is in its true nature, it doesn't move. Being subtle, it is incomprehensible. Well, that's pretty obvious. If it were very gross, I would be able to see it, I would be able to feel it, I would be able to touch it, but it is very subtle. And therefore, it cannot be seen through my senses, it cannot be described through the words, it cannot be conceptualized by the mind. And therefore, it's incomprehensible. It is far and yet near. And the commentators often say that it is far in the mind of the ignorant. It is very near in the mind of the knowledgeable person. And that is why even when we begin our spiritual quest, in the beginning we just think of either that, oh, that ideal is so far away, it's, oh, God is so far. And whichever way we think of God, seems like such a distant being or a distant truth. But the more we start thinking about it deeply, the more we start practicing prayer, worship, suddenly that which seems far comes nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer. It's through love of God. It's like this. When we are in love, the object of our love comes closer and closer and closer. So when we love God, God comes very closer. When you try to understand that reality, it comes so close that the reality becomes indistinguishable from our own true nature. And what could be nearer to us than our own selves? There couldn't be anything nearer to me than me. And so the divine being, the spirit, is the real me. And that is why to the ignorant, it will appear to be very far. But to the knowledgeable person, it appears very near. Verse 16. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktamiva cha sthitam bhuta bhartru cha tadneyam Grasishnu Prabhavishnu cha. It is undivided in beings and yet remains as if divided. That knowable is the sustainer of beings as also the destroyer and creator. The spirit, being infinite, is undivided. So it's not, we can say that we have different bodies. We can say each one of us has a mind of our own, each one of us has a body of our own. But the spirit, according to the Gita way of thinking, we don't have separate spirits. The spirit is one. But because of the blinkered view of ourselves and of the world around us, we tend to see even the spirit as divided. And so we speak about my Atman, and your Atman, and yourself. But the self is one. So that is why it is said, it is undivided in beings, yet remains as if divided. It's a little bit like the example I like to give is that if you go on the shore of a lake with different containers, say a big bucket, a jar, a glass, and all different shaped containers, and then you go and dip all those containers in the water of that lake. And let's imagine it's kind of a Walt Disney movie or something, and all of these containers come to life, and then you start talking with them. And then one of the containers say, "Who are you?" And he says, "Oh, I'm Mr. Glass, I'm Mr. Bucket," and so on. And each of them will think that you ask the water inside it, "Well, who are you?" "Well, I'm glass water, I'm bucket water," and so on. So they have acquired that limited identity because of the different shapes that they are occupying. But really speaking, if they had some knowledge, they should have said, "I'm the lake water." But because their vision has gotten limited to the container in which they are enclosed, they just think of themselves as limited. That's essentially the case with us. Every one of us is this one infinite being. But these are the containers in which we are, the body and mind. And because we have got this kind of a blinkered view, then we tend to limit our existence only to this body and mind. All that we need to see is, well, no. In reality, this container is perishable. But the water, the lake always remains. The containers will go away. And that's the idea here. And which is why it is said, undivided in beings, yet remains as if. So that as if phrase is very important. It's not really divided, but as if divided. The knowable is the sustainer of beings as also the destroyer and creator. So all the processes of new entities coming into being, remaining for a while, and disintegrating, everything occurs in the presence of this infinite reality. Swami Vivekananda once said that every composition presupposes a certain future decomposition. So any material object, a composition is really some material particles coming together. Some different material particles have come together and formed this object. Now, there is certain force holding these particles together. When that force dissipates, and these particles will then return back to their original being. And so that's why then it will get reduced to a heap of dust or ashes ultimately. So when particles can come together, they can also separate. Now all of this coming together, dwelling in that state for a while, and returning back to the source, all of this occurs in the presence of this infinite ocean. And therefore it is said, it is the sustainer of beings as also the destroyer and creator. And one final verse, verse 17. Jyotisham api tad jyotihi Tamasav paramuchyate. Jnanam jneyam jnanagamyam. Hridhi sarvasya vishtitam. It is the light of all lights and is said to be beyond all darkness. It is knowledge, the knowable and accessible through knowledge, and is implanted in the hearts of all beings. The light of all lights means that there is a passage in the Upanishad which says that what is it that gives us light? And remember, these texts have come from several thousand years ago, so it just begins by saying it's the sun that gives us light. What happens when the sun sets? Who gives us light? Well, it's the moon then that gives us light. What happens when there is a no moon, on a new moon night? Well, it's the stars. What happens when the stars are covered by the clouds? Then these fireflies. What happens when there are no fireflies around? Then fire. What happens when there is no fire? And it said speech. What happens when there is no speech? There is just silence and total darkness. What gives light? And then it said, then it's your consciousness. In other words, even if it's pitch dark, even if there is no one to guide you, you may not know anything about the existence or presence of anybody else in that pitch darkness, because you can't see anything and no one is even verbally guiding you, like, oh, there is a tree in front of you, or there is a step in front of you. So there is no sound and there is no light. But even in that situation, you know you exist. What light is there which tells you that you are still there? That is the light of consciousness. And that light is the primary light. That light is the source of all knowledge. Because it's pretty simple. No consciousness, no experience, no knowledge. The sun, it's like, well, think about it this way. If you're fast asleep, and if the sun has come out, there is still darkness for you. So the sun is not really the primary source of light, because if the sun were the primary source of light, you should have seen that light even when you are fast asleep. But no. So when you wake up, the first thing is you become conscious of that light. So that light of consciousness is needed even before the light of the sun can help you. So without the light of consciousness, for a dead man, neither the sun nor the moon, the stars are totally useless, because there is no consciousness there. So it's this light of consciousness that is the primary source of all knowledge. That is what is meant by saying it is the light of all lights. All the lights that we can think of in this world, this is the source of even that. It's said to be beyond all darkness, including the darkness of ignorance. It is knowledge, it is the knowable, and it is accessible through knowledge. And accessible through knowledge we saw those 20 qualities described, which were seen as the means to reach that, and is implanted in the hearts of all beings. So this truth, we don't have to go to deep forests or on mountain tops or in caves to find this truth. This truth is right here inside our own heart. So we will stop here today. Any thoughts, ideas, questions?
Swamiji, if body, mind, and consciousness is not one, because body can die, consciousness is not there, then how come with that body, mind, I will take as a tool to understand my consciousness?
No, say that again.
If body and consciousness is not one, because body can die, so how I will understand my consciousness through my mind, which is part of the body? When mind also died.
No,
So-
mind does not die. Death is death of only the body.
So mind remains.
Mind remains.
So mind is a part of consciousness?
No. That is why that mind will then go and occupy another body. That is what is called rebirth. In fact, if the mind also dies, then that person is enlightened. So the rebirth occurs because after death we don't become infinite. The death means simply the external cover, this body goes, but the mind remains. So we are still finite entities even after death, but we are covered by the mind. And then this mind goes and takes up another body. And that body doesn't have to be only on this little miserable little planet. Even when people say they go to heaven and enjoy or go to hell and suffer, well, even to experience the fire and brimstone in hell, there has to be a body to suffer there. So even when people go to heaven or hell, if at all there is some places like that, that mind will have to acquire some body. Even in order to go to heaven and have all the fun, you need body. So as long as the mind is there, there is always the possibility of it acquiring a body somewhere in this universe. And the body not so much a problem in some sense, because it's going to go anyway, sooner or later. The problem is the mind. It's the mind that lives with us for a long time. And therefore, in spiritual life, the primary struggle is with the mind. Because mind is the repository of all our impressions, all our prejudices, biases, everything. And undoing all that junk which is in the mind, that is what takes time. Yeah, actually, if you think about the struggle involved in spiritual life, sure, there is struggle with the body, no denying that. But the struggle with the body is, relatively speaking, easier than the struggle with the mind, because the mind is more subtle. And because it is more subtle, it is more powerful than the body.
So Swamiji, mind is the one which carries the sanskar from birth to another birth.
Yes.
So when you are enlightened, all the sanskars are finished, just like the karmas?
Well, the mind disintegrates. The mind is also a material thing. So when the mind disintegrates, everything disintegrates. So in the Upanishad, it is said, Atraiva sarve praviliyante. So for an ignorant person, the death of an ignorant person, only the body is left behind. But the mind then goes along with the spirit and somewhere else. Because it's still limited. Because it is limited, it can go somewhere else. But for in the case of enlightened being, the body, mind, everything disintegrates. So now the enlightened being is everywhere. Which is why those whom we see, these great incarnations and prophets, they are right here with us even now because they are everywhere. We are able to feel their presence. We are able to get inspired by them even now because they are not limited. They are not localized. All of us are localized. If I'm here, I'm not there. There is that little book, which is several years old, Richard Bach's, that Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Have you seen that? Have you read that? I would recommend you, please read that. It's a tiny little book, amazing. In that place, one place he says that the part of the training was that, which is the quickest way for me? If I have to go from here to there, to the door, how quickly can I go there? And from a material perspective, we would say, well, we have not known anything faster than the speed of light. So we might say, well, the fastest I could go from here to the door would be with the speed of light. But what Vedanta would say is, there is a faster way of doing it. And a faster way of doing it is to know that I'm already there. So you are really going even faster than light. So you're not even traversing any space. You're just knowing that that spot which I need to go to, I'm already there. So anyway, that's one of the many interesting things. It was put in a very, very powerful way in that little book. Anything else? Okay, so we will stop it today, and when we begin next week, we'll start with verse number 18. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Bow down to Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Last Sunday we spoke about the story of Chaitanya, and according to the lunar calendar, his birthday actually is today. So today is a very auspicious day. So this Sunday is Easter Sunday. So we'll have Antar Yoga, but focused on the Easter related theme. So songs and readings, everything will be Easter related. So I would encourage you to come for the Antar Yoga on Sunday. And as we do every month, we will also have soup and then a birthday celebration for everyone born in the month of March. And then next week, we'll continue the study on Wednesday, and Tuesday and Saturday we'll have Aarti and meditation as usual. So let's do the prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.